Rock Solid Knowledge provides a .NET template that lets you install admin UI and a skeleton SSO solution based on OpenIddict. And in this talk, we'll see how to use that template to set up a solution that includes both admin UI and OpenIddict. So the first thing we have to do is to install the template. And to do that, we run .NET new install, giving it the name of the template. And the name of the template in this case is rsk.admin-all-in-one.openiddict. If I run this, it will install the template for me. Now to prove it's been installed, we can list all of the templates. And to do that, we run .NET new list. That would show all of the installed templates, but we can filter that based on a name. So we can say .NET new list RSK, and that will show all of the RSK templates we have installed. And sure enough, here we can see the RSK admin UI all-in-one OpenIddict template. Now, both OpenIddict and admin UI need access to a database. And if you've seen any of these videos in the past, you'll know that I've used MySQL. However, in this case, we can't use MySQL. Currently, there's no Entity Framework 10 database driver for MySQL. So instead of MySQL, I'm going to use Postgres. Now, to make my life easier and to make your life easier, I'm going to run Postgres inside Docker. And to make our lives even easier still, I'm going to use Docker Compose. So I have this Docker Compose file that I provide as part of the demos for this. Now, this Compose file does a couple of things. It references Postgres, so it creates a container that runs Postgres for us. That container will expose Postgres on the standard port, so 5432. But notice at the bottom, we reference this init SQL file. In this file, I provide some SQL that will initialize Postgres for me. And that file looks like this. So it creates a database called OpenIddict. It also creates a user called OpenIddict with a password that's just P4SSW0RD. And it gives that OpenIddict user access to the OpenIddict database. So if I go back to the command prompt, I can then run docker compose up. The -D flag just means detach, so we run compose in the background. So I hit return. I already have the latest Postgres image downloaded. If we don't have that, it will download the image for me. It's then used that image to create the container, so we now have Postgres running. Once I have Postgres running, I can then create the project. Now to create the project, I'll need to run .NET new specifying the template name, and then I pass some parameters to that template. In particular, I pass the name of the solution we're going to create. I'm going to pass the type of database we're going to use, PostgreSQL, and I'm going to provide a connection string for that database. That command looks like this. So we say .NET new admin UI plus OpenIddict, solution name, PostgreSQL, connection string. And if I run this, it will now create the project for me. And then inside this directory, we can see we have this my all-in-one solution directory. And it's that directory that contains this project. I can now open up that solution inside either Visual Studio or in our case, inside Rider. So if I open the solution inside Rider, we get this. And notice it wants me to run npm install. That's because the admin UI solution contains a bunch of JavaScript libraries that we need to install. So let me do that. Then inside Rider, I'm going to go to the database window. And I'm going to add a connection to my database. Now my database is a Postgres database. It's running on localhost. My authentication is username and password. And if you remember, I created a user called OpenIddict with a password of password. I download the missing driver files, click on test connection, and that succeeds. So we click on OK, and we can see the database. If I open this up, and then click on this button which says 1 of 3, here we can see we have the OpenIddict database. And that was created by my initialization script. So we can click away and close that, and we can see the OpenIddict database here. Now currently in here, if I choose the public schema and open that up, we can see there are no tables there. If I click on refresh just to prove that, we have a database but no tables yet. So to fix that, I need to run admin UI. And admin UI will then apply all of the migrations to the database. However, before I can run admin UI, I have to get a license key. To get a license key, I need to go to this website, OpenIddictComponents.com. This is the Rock Solid Knowledge OpenIddict website. From here, if we go to Products, and then Admin UI, and then we can enter our information. So I can enter my first name, and my last name, and my email address. If I click on Get Demo, then Rock Solid Knowledge will send me a license key that we can use for a month. So we can trial Admin UI. Once I have the license key, if I go into Admin UI and into appsettings.json, closing these other windows for the time being, then we have a property for the license key. I can take the license key that was emailed to me and I can paste it into this file. Once I have that, I can then run my all-in-one solution admin UI. So we click on Run, and that now applies the migrations. So if I first look in the database and refresh, we can see we now have these 25 tables. So all the tables are now there. Admin UI has also started a browser window. But notice when it starts up, we get an error. It's trying to connect to OpenIddict, and we currently don't have OpenIddict running. So if I go back into my solution, choose the OpenIddict project and run that, that runs up alongside admin UI. And if I go back to the browser and refresh, then sure enough, the error goes away and we can now log in. So if I click on Login, we get taken to the login screen. Now, Rock Solid Knowledge provides an initial login for us so we can get into admin UI and start to configure it. So the username is info@rocksolidknowledge.com and the password is password with an uppercase P, 123 exclamation mark. Now, admin UI wants us to delete that info@rocksolidknowledge user. So the first thing it does is takes me to an admin UI screen that lets me create an administrative user for admin UI. So in here, I type in my information, so my name, my username, an email address, and a password. Click on Save. We then go back to the initial screen. I click on Login, then Login again, and now I can log in with the user I just created. So Kevin@rocksolidknowledge.com and my password. Click on Login, and we are now inside admin UI. So it really is that simple to set up OpenIddict and admin UI. So let's take a step back and see what we have here. So when we install this all-in-one solution, we end up with two projects. We end up with an admin UI project and we end up with the OpenIddict project. And these work together. So when I run OpenIddict, that launches on port 5003. And when I run admin UI, that launches on port 5001. So if I go to a browser, we can see admin UI running on port 5001. And we've just seen this. And we've used this to set up our first user. OpenIddict is running on port 5003. And these two projects work together to give us a single sign-on solution that's ready to go. So for example, when I click on Login, that takes me into OpenIddict. So here I can see I've gone to port 5003. So we use OpenIddict's user interface to allow me to log in. And we've seen already that I can log in from here with my username and my password. And in this case, that takes me back into admin UI on port 5001. So as we've just seen, admin UI relies on OpenIddict to provide its authentication user interface. Once we use OpenIddict to sign in, from within admin UI, as I go through and add, for example, a client, that updates the OpenIddict databases. Now we've seen already, when I start up admin UI for the first time, it lets me add a new user. And I can see that from the user screen here. There's my Kevin@rocksolidknowledge.com user. And this information is stored in the database that's used by both admin UI and by OpenIddict. From here, we can go through and add a client, or we could go through and add scopes, or we can go through and add new roles. And again, that information, although administered by admin UI, is used by OpenIddict. So these two applications work very closely together. Now the OpenIddict solution is mine to do with as I want. So if I go back into JetBrains Rider, close all of these windows, and look in the solution, we get the full source code here that we can amend. So for example, we've already seen the login screen. And that looks like this. It has a username field and a password field. Now we can amend this any way we want to. So we could change the CSS and change the colors. But we could make simple changes to this, such as just changing the text. So as an example of that, if I look in the login.cshtml file, this is where that login screen is set up. We have a username label. And if I browse to this, we have this login input model. And we can change this text. So let me just duplicate this display attribute and move it here. And then instead of saying username, we could say username. Now a simple change. If I just rerun the solution, go back to the browser, sure enough, it now says username. Now that's all very simple. But you can imagine, given this source code, you can change this screen to be exactly as you want it for your solution. So with this template, you get two projects. You get an installation of OpenIddict that you can use to manage your authentication and authorization, and you get an instance of Admin UI that you can use to help manage those clients and those users. The OpenIddict project that you get is then fully configurable, so you can change this to suit your company's needs. Thank you for watching. If you want to get the configuration script and the compose file, then they're on GitHub, and they're at github.com/KevinRJones/RSK-OpenIddict-admin UI.